Guys, welcome back. Hope everyone is doing well. Interesting thing to talk about today, but before we get into it, just want to give a shout out to anyone who supports the channel, any new subscribers, and if you're new and you enjoy this video, my other content, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So we have an interesting update on what Zack Snyder will be doing next at Netflix. Now, of course, I don't doubt that he's probably still going to expand on his Rebel Moon universe, Army of the Dead. He's talked about expanding both of those still, but he did mention not too long ago he would like to do a smaller, more grounded film next, and that it will be probably some time before we see him getting back to those larger scale, sci-fi fantasy types of films. So may have an idea of what that might be. The Hollywood Reporter is sharing that Zack Snyder is going to direct and co-write an LAPD action thriller for Netflix. So this is something very different from what we have seen from Zack before. He's going to direct the feature and co-write with Kurt Johnstad, which, like the article mentions, is a frequent collaborator of Zack. They've worked on lots of projects together in the past, including 300, Rebel Moon movies. Of course, he and Deborah will be producing under their Stone Quarry banner. And the article is really describing this as like a truly grounded film. We're really used to seeing Zack doing these large scale, like I said, sci-fi, fantasy, superhero, zombie, just a whole lot of stuff in those worlds, and not as much as just a grounded type of thriller movie. Very different from what we usually see from Zack. But it says it promises to be just as dramatic, thematically weighty, and action-packed, which I don't doubt. The article mentions specific details are being kept in lockup, but the action thriller is being described as being set in the high-stakes world of life and death and centered on an elite LAPD unit that is relentlessly confronted with the unforgiving collision of law and morality. And it also mentions something interesting here that I didn't know for a long time until Zack mentioned it. I don't remember what he mentioned it on, but he mentioned it somewhere, that he was supposed to do the SWAT movie a long time ago, but it didn't work out because, of course, he wanted to do this kind of, hardcore R-rated movie, which definitely not surprising. So the article mentions that as well. It says the project will mark a full circle moment for Snyder. More than 20 years ago, as he was seeking to transition from music videos and commercials, he landed his first feature with SWAT, an action movie set up at Sony. He wanted to make Big Surprise an R-rated movie. The studio wanted PG-13, so Snyder left the project. However, certain ideas and concepts remained handcuffed to his brain. So he held on to some of those things, I guess sort of similar to what happened with Rebel Moon. It was originally pitched as a Star Wars film. That didn't work out. They wanted something different from what, Zack was wanting to do. And he held on to a lot of those things. And then now he, has his own Rebel Moon verse at Netflix. Kind of a similar situation. But Zack actually shared in the article some of the past conversations that he had about it. And it was with Dan Lin, who is now at Netflix himself. So he's the Netflix head of film. He replaced Scott Stuber earlier this year. Zack said, "Years ago, Dan and I had a conversation about our shared interest in telling a compelling and visceral character-driven story set with the intense, complex, and captivating landscape of the LAPD. It's a conversation that has stuck with me. So as you would expect, I'm very excited to now have the opportunity to partner with Dan, along with the rest of my amazing partners at Netflix, in developing this story." Actually, it's also similar to what happened with Army of the Dead, because Scott Stuber was the one who kind of said yes to Dawn of the Dead, way back when Zack did Dawn of the Dead, and then he went back to Netflix and did Army of the Dead under Scott Stuber. So it's kind of a lot of parallels there. And this will be the fourth feature that Zack will direct for Netflix, including the two Rebel Moon films prior to Army of the Dead, but it will be the sixth project under the Stone Quarry banner, because under that banner is also Army of Thieves, which was the prequel to Army of the Dead, and then, of course, the animated series Twilight of the Gods. So they are moving it right along, doing more projects at Netflix. I think it's kind of interesting that he mentions that, he and Dan Lin have kind of some history on this together, because when Dan Lin actually took over for head of film at Netflix, I think some of maybe the fans were a little bit concerned about how it would work out for Zack at Netflix, because when Dan Lin got there, they kind of mentioned, pulling back on some of these huge budget movies with, big star power attached to them, and spending all of this tons of money on cinematic level movies, and try to scale back on some of that. So I think some of us maybe were like, oh, how's that going to work out for Zack because of, Rebel Moon, and maybe if they want to scale things down a little bit. but looks like it is working out, you know? So I am not really too worried about that. Clearly, we have seen what Zack can do even with a very conservative budget with Rebel Moon, with both movies, and also having director's cuts of both movies. So I'm not worried about anything like that because I know what Zack can do with a very modest conservative budget. And that's with movies that are extremely visual effects heavy, green screen. I mean, so much CGI. So I'm not worried about that at all. Obviously, this is completely in a different world from, like I mentioned, what we're used to seeing Zack doing typically. This is going to be a lot more grounded, real world, you know, like practical effects, that kind of stuff. But I don't doubt that it's going to still have Zack's touch on it. Action, you know, great story, probably unexpected twists and turns, things that are a little bit shocking. So I expect all of those things to remain the same. It's going to be interesting to see Zack's take on this type of film. That I was pretty shocked when I found out that he was supposed to do the SWAT movie way back when. Like, wow, you know, like we're just not, that's not usually what we associate with Zack. So it's going to be cool to see him do something like this. And also remember, I shared on the channel not too long ago that he's also supposed to be doing a UFC film. So that's also something different, a little bit different from his typical wheelhouse. So we'll see, you know, as we continue to learn more about these two projects from Zack coming up sometime. We don't really know anything about timelines or anything like that, but pretty cool to just kind of know what he's working on right now and what's to come. Just wanted to share that really quickly. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Really do appreciate all of this support. Don't forget to check out anything you missed previously on the short section. See you next time.